Hey guys, Parfax here, and today we're talking about the new weapon in New World, which is the Blunderbuss. Alright, let's get started. Alright, we're here on the PTR, and we're going to be talking about the new weapon, the Blunderbuss. Before we start going into the skills and stuff like that, and maybe some of the weapons, I think it's going to pair very nicely with it. I do want to just go over some of the prerequisites, tell you about how it scales, tell you about my first impressions of it, whether it's going to be good in PvE, PvP. We're going to go over a bunch of stuff when it comes to this new weapon, because I know you guys are really excited to play it. Now, the first thing I will say with this new bad boy is the one thing you really do have to watch out for is its ranged. It is by far the shortest ranged weapon in the game. I don't think this will hit. No, it doesn't. I'm too far away. As you can see, move just a little bit. This might hit. It does. So you can see here, that's kind of like the max range. I don't know the exact range. I could probably look it up, but I think it's better to give you guys a little bit of visual because there's no, like, I can't just look at that mob and it tells me exactly how far it is away. So you got to really visualize how far people are away so you really get to know exactly the range of this weapon. It's very small. I consider it basically a melee weapon. So whenever you play it, just picture it as a melee weapon because that's kind of what it is. Now, the playstyle of this weapon is very, very different. So it has two different trees. They call it the Containment and the Chaos. And the Containment is essentially more of like your CC, your slows, your kind of... it's not really CC. There's not even any hard CC in here. You have a gap closer, sort of. You have a slow. And you have a shot that can knock you back. It might not knock you back, but can be kind of comboed for a little bit of damage. And then the chaos side, it really is chaos. You're throwing bombs. Honestly, I think that Azov Shrapnel Blast and Blast Shot should have probably been swapped. This is more of a containment. This is a nice little CC skill. And this has a little bit of chaos feature to it, which we'll talk about in a second. But pretty cool. So it plays very different than any other weapon that I've ever played really in my life. I don't know if I've ever played with a weapon that is similar to this. It has a lot of cool little features, and it has essentially sort of like a one-shot mechanic to it, or a very skilled shot mechanic to it, and then it has some really nice CC potential to it. So if you didn't know, when it comes to attributes, this weapon scales mainly off of dexterity, and then its secondary is intelligence. It is our first weapon that scales on strength and intelligence. What this means, if you don't know, it just means the Blunderbuss, if you put 100 points into strength, it'll scale it basically at 90%. So it'll essentially give you like 90 points of strength, and intelligence, it's going to be 65, I believe was what it is. So if you put 100 points in there, it'll give you essentially like 65 points of intelligence. Now, if you're like, man, why would I want that? It's okay. There's actually things that you can do with this type of scaling that make it even sometimes better than things that, like the bow that scales strictly on one stat. Like, for instance, if you really wanted to go full glass cannon, what you can do with one of the double stat... Oh, no, we're gonna attack! What you can do with one of the double stat weapons is actually pump one into the main stat and then pump the rest of it, or most of it, into another. What that means is we can do full strength, and then we can go into intelligence as well. Do like 50 con, we can reset our points here, and we can just... Well, we have dex gear on, but you can put some points into strength, points into dex, and you can really start hitting the points that you really want to hit and really start pumping the damage higher than even, you know, weapons like the bow or the great axe. It really scale on one different element. All right, so now we've kind of talked a little bit about the range. Another thing to keep in mind is when you shoot this weapon, it does have 2 shots and then you need to reload. So if you look on my screen there, you can see 2 little basically like lines around my circle. Shoot, there goes one, there goes another, and now we have to reload. Now, sometimes you can reload while looking down the sight, and sometimes you can't. I don't know if that's a bug. I imagine it is. But sometimes if it doesn't reload, you just do have to back out of your right click. That's all I'm doing to zoom in a little bit. And then it will reload. Now, the one thing is I don't know how to reload it without shooting an extra shot, so we're just going to shoot another shot so we can reload it. There may be a way to reload it, but I haven't found it on the PTR yet. Now, another thing to note before we start going into the skills is, if you can see, there's a bunch of shells or bullets that come out. At base, it'll shoot 6 shots. It's hard to see it on here, but let's give it a nice little shot. I think I saw 6 there, but it has 6. There is a way to get more, which we will talk about here in just a second. So keep that in mind. You do want, this weapon is very, very precise. It is not a shotgun. Typically, shotguns have a very wide spread, and you can do some damage without having to actually aim directly at the target. This weapon's really not that. You really do need very precise aim, but if you do, oh man, does this weapon do a lot of damage. All right, let's start getting into each of the individual skills. Let's go over, we're going to go over every skill, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one. So we basically have net shot. Essentially, this is kind of exactly what it sounds like. You're going to shoot a net out. You're going to slow people. That's basically what it does. We can read it here. Fires a large size net projectile out of the blunderbuss, dealing 40% weapon damage. The net is a large projectile that slows anyone hit by 40% for 2.5 seconds. If standing still or moving backwards, the recoil from this attack will knock you further backwards. If moving sideways or forward, you will continue to move or continue forward moving unhindered. This is kind of going to be another, that last set of text there is kind of the same here with the shrapnel blast. That just means if I'm standing still, I'm going to move backwards. And if I was moving forwards, I would not actually move any farther forward. All right, we're not going to show you that, but just know that if you're moving forward or sideways, it's not going to knock you backwards at all. So next ability, we have Claw Shot. This is going to be one of the most iconic skills on the blunderbuss. Now, I will say this skill is very hard to hit, but when you hit it, it is very cool. Whoop. You get to just teleport to your target. In PvP, this is actually an extremely hard ability to hit. It sometimes can be a little bit buggy, but that's why we're on the PTR and testing it out. But it is essentially your gap closer, and man, is it a cool one at that. Now, it is, like I said, buggy or just really hard to hit, but we can read it here. Shoot forward, a 4-pronged claw attached to a chain from the muzzle. Projectile will travel up to 14 meters and cannot pull you upwards more than 3 meters. If it connects to an enemy, it will deal 40% weapon damage and inflict a root for 1 second before quickly pulling you towards them. The pull can be canceled by any ability use or primary fire. That just means you can get out of it. And then if the taunt gem is in it, you can taunt people with it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it's essentially your, gap closer. It is a pretty interesting one at that. It is definitely different. We shoot it, we get targeted, we got, tracked to the target, and it's pretty cool. Like I said, in PvP, it is pretty rough to use, but when pulled off, it actually looks cool and works out pretty well. Next, we have Azoth Shrapnel Blast. Essentially, it is sort of a shotgun-esque effect. And you see here that fires 5 shots horizontally fanned in front of you while pushing yourself backwards. Each shot will deal 58% weapon damage. Each consecutive hit on the same target will deal 15% less damage than the previous hit. And then we have this note down here that says fire a singular bomb down the center of the fan. This bomb will impact itself in the world and explode, dealing 100% damage in a 3-meter area after a 5-second delay. One cool thing you can do with this skill, let's put it on here, is you can kind of animation cancel it as well. Let's see. I haven't actually tried to see if I can do this into it. Basic attacks. Let's see. It's about the same whether you do it both ways. So all I did there was I did my F, which is the shrapnel shot, and then I did a basic attack, which you can actually do it the other way as well. So let's do a basic attack into a shrapnel shot. See there, it's a little bit faster. I think this is going to be part of your one shot. You can do so much burst damage with these two things. If you get all of your shots, especially if you have the extra shots, which we're going to show you here in a minute, into the Azoth Shrapnel Blast, this is going to do some absolutely crazy damage. We'll show it to you one more time. Actually, we'll just do... Oh, I missed it. Okay. We'll show you here. Didn't need to. We killed him with the headshot. But you can do some absolutely crazy burst damage with it. It's actually pretty crazy. Now let's go ahead and check in the ultimate. It says unload. The next shot fired within 6 seconds after triggering an ability will have 9 pellets instead of 6. This effect can stack up to 2 times. This is pretty crazy. So this is one thing that if you want to do, let's say you do want to do that little combo, you might want to do an ability first. So if we do that, now we actually have the extra stack in there. We can just go boom, boom, you know, just do like little. Now, if you want to do it the other way, it should put 9 pellets in there, which is pretty cool. It's a little bit slower to do the shrapnel blast into the auto attack, but it will give you those 9 pellets if you haven't used anything recently. So you can go. It's not quite as quick, but it is a very big burst combo that I think people are going to be underestimating when it comes to PvP with this specific weapon. All right, next, let's go to the chaos side, where it gets pretty crazy. Okay, first we have splitting grenade, which we will put splitting. We'll put all 3 of these abilities on here. And splitting grenade is essentially a grenade. Well, we'll just read it here. Shoots a grenade out of the blunderbuss that will bounce up to 4 times and will detonate after a second and a half. The splitting grenade can also be manually detonated by reactivating this ability key at any time. Upon detonation, it will create 3 mini grenades that will disperse and explode 1 second after landing, dealing 85% weapon damage in a 3-meter area. And the big part here is each successive grenade hit against the same target deals 40% less base damage. That's actually not what I was thinking here. It was right here. This little passive is really cool. So if you didn't notice, we have some different type of passives in here. I'm not sure why they did this, but it's essentially the same as if they just went straight down. Maybe they did this with the chaos to just make it look different, make it visually, more chaotic. But you have a cool one here: splitting grenade, explosion, inflicts burn on hit, dealing 10% weapon damage per second. Can stack up to 3 times. If you can get 3 hits on it, does really big damage. So, or at least a nice little burn stack on him, at least. So let's just show you what this ability looks like. So it kind of exploded because I double tapped it. But let me show you what it looks like when you don't actually double tap it. We'll be back when my cooldown's up. All right, we got the cooldown back up, so make sure you don't double tap it. So we're just gonna hit it 1 time. You can see it goes out, explodes, put down 3 more bombs, and can actually do some pretty cool damage. Bro, get out of my face. All right, next ability we're going to talk about is Mortar Charge, and this is going to be probably the most iconic spell for this weapon, and it is exactly what you would think of when you have a skill called Mortar Charge. Load the Blunderbuss with heavy canisters for the next 15 seconds or 3 shots. Shots will no longer fire multiple pellets, but instead will fire a heavy, fast-diving mortar-style canister that causes a tall explosion upon impact, dealing 126% weapon damage in a 3-meter area. If the target is 10 meters away or further, they will take 35% increased damage from the mortar. And then you get here, you can get an extra canister slot down here. So we just load up the mortar with our Q. And here we go. Boom. Look at that. Such a cool ability. This is going to be one of the most used abilities in PvP for this weapon. It is going to be essentially the AoE, spell that people are using for it. It's going to be pretty cool. You're going to be hearing that mortar noise from now until forever, until they nerf it into the ground. It does do quite a bit of damage in PvP, and it's actually kind of fun to use. Let's see if we can get him here. You can see here the range is pretty small. One thing to note is, see here, we have 1 mortar canister left in here. If we do anything like swap weapons, go to another ability, we do lose that last charge and it goes on cooldown. So just keep that in mind if you swap weapons, and you will always have to reload your weapon. Now, I don't know if it necessarily takes any. Let's actually see if it takes any of your shells. We see we're at 624 here. We're going to swap to mortar when it comes out. We're going to shoot 1. We're 623. Now, no, so we don't lose any shots, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so I guess when I swapped weapon, I didn't have to reload, but most of the time you will have to reload. Actually, let's just check that right now. Let's see if we stay on the weapon. We have to reload if we shoot all of our shots. I believe you'll have to reload. All right, so let's pump it in there. Yeah, so if you shoot your shots, so I imagine if you have 2 left in there, you won't have to. If you have 1, then you'll have to just shoot 1 shot. So it does count your actual, your cartridges, which is a little odd. But yeah, so it's a really iconic ability, or at least it's going to be iconic. It is a very cool ability, and it's going to be used a lot from time to come. All right, last ability on the Blunderbuss is Blast Shot. And this is essentially a pushback knockdown ability that has a little bit of group utility. So blast immense wind out of the blunderbuss, knocking down any target immediately in front of you. Blast shot deals 70% weapon damage. And then when you have this last part here, it says in a 10-meter area in front of you remains influenced by the wind for the next 8 seconds, you and your allies gain a 25% movement speed bonus. I don't think this is necessarily worth it. The area isn't very large, but I'll show you what the skill looks like, and it's actually pretty cool. You see there, I blew him forward. They kind of got hit back and knocked down. Go ahead and shoot him in the head so he doesn't mess with us. But yeah, it's a really cool ability, and I think it's going to be used a little bit. I don't think it's going to be as iconic as Mortar, but I definitely do think it has a place. Let's go over the last ultimate here. On the Chaos side, it is doubled down. Once every 30 seconds, your next ability used will have its cooldown reduced by 50%. This is something that you have to keep a track of if you really want to do some like massive damage. If you can pair this cooldown with your mortar charge, you can get upwards of 8 mortar charges in such a tiny period of time. It's going to be a lot of damage, but it is a little bit of micromanaging. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about now. We've kind of went over everything about the blunderbuss here. We're not going to go over every single passive. You can look those up on the multiple different websites. We're going to be having builds come out for these, but I want to talk about a few weapons that I think this weapon pairs pretty well with, and a few that I don't think it pairs that well with. First, we're going to talk about the weapon that pretty much everybody immediately thought of and immediately started pairing with it, and you probably guessed it, which is the Great Axe. Now, having played with it and having watched people play with it and talked to people that have played with it, honestly, it doesn't pair that well with the Great Axe. In theory, it should, because you have a gap closing ability, you have some extra CC, you're like, man, they'll never get away. The problem is the Great Axe, first off, is a very big AoE weapon. So it pairs very well with something like the Warhammer, or even sometimes the Hatchet, which that's more of a PvE thing. But it really pairs very well with stuff like that because it kind of still goes on the same trajectory, right? You still have, it's basically the same weapon with more CC. Kind of the best way to look at it. Yeah, it's definitely a different weapon, but it synergizes really well. When you play these two weapons together, it just doesn't synergize that well. It's a very single target, single CC focused type of weapon. You do have a little bit, but let's be honest, if you're knocking people back and down, it's not really helping you that much. The gap close can be really good. You do have charge and bloodlust. Maybe if you're trying to get something like a bow player, but even then, they'll probably be able to dodge it. I don't think it's that great. Net is pretty good, but again, another sort of single target-esque ability that kind of just doesn't synergize very well with the Great Axe. Having said that, I think there are a couple different weapons that synergize very well with it. So I think the Sword and Shield pairs very well with the Blunderbuss. And why is that? Is because you can go basically a one-shot Blunderbuss combo. Sort of similar to, some people were running Sword and Shield Hatchet. You can run Sword and Shield into Blunderbuss. You basically do your shield charge into your stun, and then you can basically, let's get your skills here. Then you can just go, so we've just did the stun with the Sword and Shield. You can just go, and you can do a double shot to their face, and they're probably dead. If they're not dead, they're very close. So it pairs very well. You can basically run it as an assassin build. It was probably one of the deadliest ways you could possibly run it. And then you still have, on top of your like assassin build, you want to do some stat padding, you do have mortar charges to kind of start racking up the damage. And I think this is going to be probably going to be the meta way to build this weapon, or at least to some extent. The other weapon I think it pairs decently with is probably actually the spear. I think if you go sort of the sweep route here, I'm not a big javelin fan, but you probably like sweep, vault kick, and either skewer or perforate. I mean, you could go cyclone. It's cool. You can go javelin if you want to, but I just don't think javelin's that good of a skill. This is a PvE. This is actually even my PvE build. I just did it really quick. We were running the dungeon. But yeah, I really do think that having vault kick and sweep will pair very well with it. You do lose a little bit of movement skills, you know, as in this from the sword and shield and in the great axe, but I think what you make up for it with the amount of CC and the amount of damage a spear does, it can pair very well. All right, that's kind of what I think pairs very well on the strength side, but don't worry, I think it actually has a really good pairing when it comes to the intelligence side. Now, the weapon that I think it pairs with the most, and or at least it synergizes the most with, is actually the fire staff. The fire staff, if you didn't know, got some really nice buffs. It has basically a meteor-sized hitbox on the fireball now. It can crit again, and Pillar of Fire got a nice little buff. So I think what you can do is you can run something along the lines of Pillar of Fire, Fireball, and Burnout. You can use this as basically your big damaging skills, you know, your main weapon damage. And then we're going to be using the Blunderbuss as a secondary weapon. Now, typically when it comes to the Fire Staff, you're running one of 3 weapons. The most common thing is to run the Ice Gauntlet, and then we have Rapier and not so much anymore, but Void Gauntlet. Now, when it comes to Void Gauntlet, the route is still insane. You can still do that, and it's still such a crazy CC, even with the CC change. The Oblivion's okay if you can stand still. It's really hard in PvP to stand still because bow players, musket players are just going to pick you apart. So I don't think the Void Gauntlet synergizes that well with Fire Staff. Then when it comes to Ice Gauntlet, which is, let's talk about the sort of meta build for it. So let's talk about what the Ice Gauntlet does. Let's go to the Ice Gauntlet here. And with it, the meta build essentially now is Ice Spike, Ice Storm, and most of the time probably Ice Shower. Now, some people sometimes will not take Ice Spike, and they will take Entomb. So let's talk a little bit about this and why the Blunderbuss may be better than this. So the biggest downside is, I will say, is Ice Storm is a ability that we can put down on the ground. It is a big damage in AoE, and we can swap to our Fire Staff and continue doing damage. Now, the thing about the Fire Staff, unless you have Refreshing Pillar of Fire and you're getting really good at hitting your Pillar of Fire, you actually have some downtime between your spells, so it's not a big deal to have to stay on our other bar. Now, Ice Spike, there's no ability there that really kind of gets this type of effect. It really was nerfed. It's still an okay ability. It has some burst damage, but it's not nearly as good as it was before. And then we have a CC ability and a defensive ability here on the Ice Gauntlet. Now let's talk a little bit about why I think this pairs really well with the Fire Staff. Because what we can run is we actually have a few options. First off, we're running Mortar Charge. This is going to replace Ice Storm. This is going to be our damaging spell. This is going to be very big damage. It's going to do a lot of things. If we want to go a war route, we want to go maybe like the Ice Spike route, we can go maybe Splitting Grenade, and we can try to grenade the point, then mortar the point. Will be absolutely sick, crazy. You're talking like full Chad mode. This is what we're running. Okay, now if you want to be a little bit more defensive, you have a couple choices. I think we're probably always going to be running Blast Zone. It is just going to be a pushback knockdown, which I think is going to be really good. And it's also AoE. So if you have 2 or 3 people, you can do a dodge roll back. You can hit them with this, and this will give you time to do your burnout. Now, it is going to be very important that you actually hit this correctly. But I think if you hit this correctly, this ability is going to be an absolute must. Now, if you don't want to run Splitting Grenade, of course, we're running Mortar Charge, we're running Blast Shot, then you have an ability over here we want to use. And what ability would that be? Well, basically, you're probably going to run Net Shot. This is just going to be if you are, you know, getting singled out. If you're like, you know, Great Axe is chasing me. Boom, we can hit him with a Net Shot, then we can get away. We're not really going to be clawing to anybody, so we don't really need this. If you're looking to go like full Chad damage mode, you can go Azoth Shrapnel Blast. It does have a knockback, or at least personal knockback. But let's be honest, you don't really want to be in that range very often. The only time you want to be in that range is possibly to give him a Mortar Charge. And let's be honest, the one thing that's going to be underrated for this is on the builds for wars specifically and OPRs, this is going to be a very, very good ability, very high cooldown, but to really get a big, it's a very big knockdown. It's going to be kind of reminiscent of like a better version of Clear Out for the Warhammer. So it's going to be very good. So yes, if I was to run it on Fire Staff, which we're going to make a build, I might run, I'll run Blast Shot and Mortar for sure. If I'm feeling Ultra Chad, we're going Splitting Grenade. If I'm feeling a little bit more defensive, we're probably going Net Shot. And then when it comes to rapier, rapier is just the best secondary weapon in the game. You're not going to find anything that is better. The mortar or the blunderbuss is going to do more damage, but it is not going to be as survivable. So just keep that in mind. All right, guys, this is a super long video, but we are talking about the blunderbuss. We're going to be having builds coming out soon. We're going to be doing blunderbuss builds. We're going to have a bunch of content coming out. I have probably 4 New World videos already recorded, and I just got to finish editing them and putting them up. This one's probably going to be, I imagine this comes out probably Monday or Tuesday. So forgive me if it's not on Monday or Tuesday, but yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you put the notification bell on because we're doing a bunch of New World stuff. We're going to be having videos such as, or they might even be out by now, there's going to be hidden stuff you didn't realize was in the last patch. There's actually a few things that were pretty big changes for a few weapons that I haven't heard anybody talk about. We're going to have a video talking about what you should be doing dailies. We're going to have a video talking about what you should be doing to prepare for the next patch, because there's stuff that I'm doing right now on live server. They're going to help me and push me forward for the next patch, so keep an eye out for that. And we're doing build guides for the blunderbuss. We're going to be doing a bunch of things, so stay tuned. Put the notification bell on. We're going to be having all of your New World content you could possibly imagine coming very soon. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in a tournament.